Section 28 of Further Chronicles of Avonlea. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Further Chronicles of Avonlea by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Chapter 14. Only a Common Fellow, Part 2. "Owen! Lord ha' mercy on us, Owen!" I said, just like that, going cold all over, for it's the truth that I thought it was his spirit come back to forbid that unholy marriage. But he sprang right in, and caught my wrinkled old hands in a grasp that was of flesh and blood. "Aunt Rachel, I'm not too late," he said, savage-like. "Tell me I'm in time." I looked up at him, standing over me there, tall and handsome, no change in him except he was so brown and had a little white scar on his forehead, and though I couldn't understand at all, being all bewildered like, I felt a great, deep thankfulness. "No, you're not too late," I said. "Thank God," said he under his breath, and then he pulled me into the parlor and shut the door. They told me at the station that Philippa was to be married to Mark Foster today. I couldn't believe it, but I came here as fast as horseflesh could bring me. "Aunt Rachel, it can't be true. She can't care for Mark Foster, even if she had forgotten me." "It's true enough that she is to marry Mark," I said, half laughing, half crying, "but she doesn't care for him. Every beat of her heart is for you. It's all her stepma's doings. Mark has got a mortgage on the place, and he told Isabella Clark that, if Philippa would marry him, he'd burn the mortgage, and, if she wouldn't, he'd foreclose. Philippa is sacrificing herself to save her stepma for her dead father's sake." "It's all your fault," I cried, getting over my bewilderment. "We thought you were dead. Why didn't you come home when you were alive? Why didn't you write?" "I did write after I got out of the hospital several times," he said, "and never a word in answer, Aunt Rachel. What was I to think when Philippa wouldn't answer my letters?" "She never got one," I cried. "She wept her sweet eyes out over you. Somebody must have got those letters." And I knew then, and I know now, though never a shadow of proof have I, that Isabella Clark had got them and kept them. That woman would stick at nothing. "Well, we'll sift that matter over some other time," said Owen impatiently. "There are other things to think of now. I must see Philippa." "I'll manage it for you," I said eagerly, but just as I spoke the door opened and Isabella and Mark came in. Never shall I forget the look on Isabella's face. I almost felt sorry for her. She turned sickly yellow and her eyes went wild. They were looking at the downfall of all her hopes and schemes. I didn't look at Mark Foster at first, and when I did there wasn't anything to see. His face was just as sallow and wooden as ever. He looked undersized and common beside Owen. Nobody'd ever have picked him out for a bridegroom. Owen spoke first. "I want to see Philippa," he said, as if it were but yesterday that he had gone away. All Isabella's smoothness and policy had dropped away from her, and the real woman stood there, plotting and unscrupulous as I'd always known her. "You can't see her," she said, desperate-like. "She doesn't want to see you. You went and left her and never wrote, and she knew you weren't worth fretting over, and she has learned to care for a better man." "I did write, and I think you know that better than most folks," said Owen, trying hard to speak quiet. "As for the rest, I'm not going to discuss it with you. When I hear from Philippa's own lips that she cares for another man, I'll believe it, and not before." "You'll never hear it from her lips," said I. Isabella gave me a venomous look. "You'll not see Philippa until she is a better man's wife," she said stubbornly, "and I order you to leave my house, Owen Blair." "No!" It was Mark Foster who spoke. He hadn't said a word, but he came forward now and stood before Owen. Such a difference as there was between them! But he looked Owen right in the face, quiet-like, and Owen glared back in fury. "Will it satisfy you, Owen, if Philippa comes down here and chooses between us?" "Yes, it will," said Owen. Mark Foster turned to me. "Go and bring her down," said he. Isabella, judging Philippa by herself, gave a little moan of despair, and Owen, blinded by love and hope, thought his cause was won. But I knew my dearie too well to be glad, and Mark Foster did too, and I hated him for it. I went up to my dearie's room, all pale and shaking. When I went in, she came to meet me like a girl going to meet death. "Is it time?" she said, with her hands locked tight together. I said not a word, hoping that the unlooked-for sight of Owen would break down her resolution. I just held out my hand to her and led her downstairs. She clung to me, and her hands were as cold as snow. When I opened the parlor door I stood back and pushed her in before me. She just cried, "Owen!" and shook so that I put my arms about her to steady her. Owen made a step towards her, his face and eyes all aflame with his love and longing, but Mark barred his way. "Wait till she has made her choice," he said, and then he turned to Philippa. I couldn't see my dearie's face, but I could see Mark's, and there wasn't a spark of feeling in it. Behind it was Isabella's, all pinched and grey. "Philippa," said Mark, "Owen Blair has come back. He says he has never forgotten you, and that he wrote to you several times. I have told him that you have promised me, but I leave you freedom of choice. Which of us will you marry, Philippa?" My dearie stood straight up, and the trembling left her. She stepped back, and I could see her face, white as the dead, but calm and resolved. "I have promised to marry you, Mark, and I will keep my word," she said. The colour came back to Isabella Clark's face, but Mark's did not change. "Philippa," said Owen, and the pain in his voice made my old heart ache bitterer than ever, "have you ceased to love me?" My dearie would have been more than human if she could have resisted the pleading in his tone. She said no word, but just looked at him for a moment. We all saw the look. Her whole soul, full of love for Owen, showed out in it. Then she turned and stood by Mark. Owen never said a word. He went as white as death, and started for the door. But again Mark Foster put himself in the way. "Wait," he said. "She has made her choice, as I knew she would, but I have yet to make mine. And I choose to marry no woman whose love belongs to another man. Philippa, I thought Owen Blair was dead, and I believed that when you were my wife I could win your love. But I love you too well to make you miserable. Go to the man you love. You are free." "And what is to become of me?" wailed Isabella. "Oh, you! I had forgotten about you," said Mark, kind of weary-like. He took a paper from his pocket and dropped it in the grate. "There is the mortgage. That is all you care about, I think. Good morning." He went out. He was only a common fellow, but somehow just then he looked every inch the gentleman. I would have gone after him and said something, but the look on his face—no, it was no time for my foolish old words. Philippa was crying, with her head on Owen's shoulder. Isabella Clark waited to see the mortgage burned up, and then she came to me in the hall, all smooth and smiling again. "Really, it's all very romantic, isn't it? I suppose it's better as it is, all things considered. Mark behaved splendidly, didn't he? Not many men would have done as he did." For once in my life I agreed with Isabella. But I felt like having a good cry over it, and I had it. I was glad for my dearie's sake and Owen's, but Mark Foster had paid the price of their joy, and I knew it had beggared him of happiness for life. End of section 28.